Well, the Power Up Cup may be over, guys, but that doesn't mean that's all said and done from all of us here at COWZA. We thought we'd bring you a little bit of a wrap-up show, a podcast of sorts, just to sort of talk about everything we saw from the Power Up Cup that just took place over the last 4 or so weeks. As you can see, I'm joined by a few guests. My name, of course, is Sun Phoenix, as per usual, running the show here, at least from a broadcast standpoint. And I'm joined once again, I suppose, by two of my fairly consistent co-casters, Blur and Terran Lord. How's it going, guys?
Yeah, I mean, really good tournament we just had go on. I was excited to kind of dive into talking about it a bit.
Yeah, same. It was definitely an interesting one, especially coming back after quite a long break from compared to Overwatch in South Africa and being a new game, so to speak. It was nice seeing, especially newer players who probably didn't even touch the game before Overwatch 2.
Yeah, a lot of new faces we saw, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But of course, the Power Up Cup was a tournament that took place for over 4 weeks, a Swiss-style tournament, as I alluded to earlier. And we saw a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces, and we've got some results. So what we'll be doing today is most of it will be taken up by just sort of taking a look at the results teams from the bottom all the way to the top, and kind of talking about their performance, how we think they did, and looking a little bit into the rosters and kind of giving our opinions. Of course, Blur and Terran, a bit more expert opinions coming from them. Kind of giving opinions on where they ended up and what we think we might see from them going forward if they keep their rosters as is. But before into that, we'll talk a little bit generally about the Power Up Cup, and then we've also got a tier list that we'll be slotting teams into. Now, I'll talk about this before we get into that, but it is going to be more about the tiers than individual placements of teams. I think we have individual placements of teams. If you haven't been paying attention, it's called the Power Up Cup. So that's going to be, from 13th up to 1st, that's where we think teams should be placed. It's more about getting a sense of, is there a top 4 teams that are a step above the rest, or a kind of a midfield and then a back end. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But before we get into all of that, we'll just talk a bit more generally about the Power Up Cups. So, Blur, Terran, why don't you guys explain a little bit? We'll start with you, Blur, about what the Power Up is, what the Power Up Cup is/was, and what you guys wanted to do with it. Because of course, if you're watching this and you're not aware, Blur and Terran Lord, as well as being players/coaches, they're also kind of a big part of the tournament organization side of the Power Up Cup. So they're kind of uniquely positioned to give us a sense of what the story behind the Power Up Cup actually was. So Blur, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys wanted to do with the Power Up Cup?
Okay, so yeah, obviously jumping into Overwatch 2, completely new game, completely new sets of teams. Everything's completely fresh from what we saw from the end of last year, which, we had Buffalo Cup and that was about it, right? So that, once that ended, there was really nothing really that was happening in Overwatch. We didn't really have the interest, we didn't really have the teams for it. And, Overwatch 2 obviously brought a lot of hype. So the first thing that we wanted to do going into this is obviously some of the more experienced faces and some of the people that have been here for a while and will recognize seeding tournaments. It's something we used to do every year with VS Gaming. It's something we did with ATK. So that's effectively what the Power Up Cup was. As much as, a lot of people wanted it to go to brackets to finals, it's something that we just needed a set of this is where you guys are starting your league in. We've got our top 8 teams that'll be starting in an upper division, and we got the bottom 5 for now, but we already have a couple of confirmed teams coming through into the next stage that'll be starting in the lower division, obviously since they're not placed, and kind of seeing how they can kind of fare against their competition there. So the Power Cup broadly was just, okay, we are running a tournament that is meant to just ignite the spark of South African Overwatch, meant to kind of power up our community, but then also meant to be something that gives us a broad idea of where our community stands in terms of the strength of teams. And then obviously we ran into a whole lot of challenges about doing that around our current national power crisis, which, Terran, I think you can talk about that and how we had to schedule that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was definitely very difficult, especially with the pickup teams a lot. Kind of bringing in players who originally they weren't. These were not the teams they chose to be on. There was a call for players to sign up, and they signed up, got placed onto teams, and then when you have, especially newer players coming in who haven't been in this kind of setting before, don't know really what the expectations are, it's very difficult to find times around that load shedding schedule, which, as we all know, can change from stage 2 to 6 in a matter of minutes, basically. And it kind of became a bit of a hurry to get, can we get players? Can we get matches done? Do we need to extend times? And I think luckily overall, with the work of the admin team and help of teams and all the players, we got all the matches done. Within the weeks that they were confined to. Sure, there were issues, but the matches happened, and I think that's a major, not pro is not really the word, but an achievement of everyone that was involved. Making sure we got everything done, and also we got, I say, pretty good amount of cast going, which, you know, considering lack of casting, producing, you know, the players who might cast are playing in these games, so it's very difficult to get that going, and it ended up going. And for the most part, like, say, you know, with maybe one or two here and there, the standings represent what we expected, I would like to say.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go for it, Blue.
no, definitely go ahead.
I was just going to say on the casting front, yeah, we were kind of, there were multiple weeks where I had 8 until 10 load shedding session every single day of the week, except for like one, and then there happened to be no matches on that day. So yeah, from that broadcasting perspective, and, you know, I wasn't even organizing. I think Peach was handling most of the legwork along with the admin team of getting casts done. So if you didn't see as many casts as you would have liked to, we get it, and we feel the same way. I think there were many times where we had 2 of the 3 people who needed to be involved ready to go, and we just were missing that last caster, or Peach is our current only producer, as seems to be the case so frequently. He had load shedding, and so we just couldn't get a cast together. But as I agree with you, Taryn, we kind of got as many casts as we could feasibly get out of this 4-week period, and we saw a lot of great games, and I think it culminated in a pretty awesome finals match as well that Blur and I got to cover, so that was very cool. Taryn alluded to it there, Blur, in terms of no real big surprises in terms of the overall standings, which we'll jump into in just a little bit. Is that something you agree with, or do you think there were kind of a few standouts?
I mean, I think there's definitely a couple of teams that we saw some definite variation out of, like, where we would have expected them to be with the players they had available. I mean, I think we had a sense coming in that we were looking at Inglorious Blasters and Beastie Boys as 2 of our strongest teams. It's, you know, Beastie Boys being a team of league winners and Inglorious Blasters being a team of GMs and above, you know, it's you've got a pretty good sense of where those 2 teams are going to finish from the beginning. But I'm really proud to see that, you know, a couple of the pickup teams finishing quite high. I mean, Hatchlings finishing where they would be ending in a top division spot for league standings is really, really good. Eulogy ending second is another one that, you know, it's a bunch of players that, you know, you've got some Odyssey players, some Legacy players that kind of both filtered into Eulogy. And I mean, you wouldn't be expecting, like, those teams were good teams, but they weren't second place in the country good, you know? So to see them pushing that bar is a really, really, like, great kind of show of how well they played through this tournament. So yeah, I mean, you can obviously say the same. I think, you know, maybe we expect to see teams like Typo and Blackwatch finishing a little higher up with the quality of players they have available to them. But again, at the end of the day, I think it's a fair representation of how our tournament's distributed these teams. See a lot of the newer teams, the teams that kind of deal with groups that you play Overwatch as a second priority, school teams, for example, kind of sitting there. And I mean, you know, lots of space to learn, lots of space to grow. But I mean, that is where you'd be really expecting those teams to finish. And we're seeing a lot of the big teams and a lot of the more dedicated teams finishing in the higher brackets. So I think, yeah, it's a pretty fair layout, given how everything started and how everything's going.
Cool. Looking at Eulogy there surprised me, because I was sure we didn't cast Inglorious Blasters versus Eulogy as that last match. But I realize now that's kind of a consequence of the Swiss Swiss, tournament style.
Eulogy actually ended up finishing second, not based on mixed median results. It actually was map differential. They just had the best map differential out of all the 3-1 teams. So straight up, they're just the second best team right now.
The numbers don't lie. So yeah, that is a big surprise for me, especially given the quality of the team in third, which is Beastie Boys. Now you did mention, Blur, that this was a kind of seeding tournament, broadly speaking, right? This is kind of setting us up for the future of competitive Overwatch in South Africa in 2023. Now, if you're, you know, chomping at the bit, wanting to hear more about that, stick around to the end. There's a little teaser for you there. The guys will be going into what we might see in the future. But yeah, that the Swiss tournament style kind of made things a little bit awkward to kind of see how they all played out, because we were casting that finals finals game, that last game, where we knew who'd come out the winner, but second place hadn't really been decided. So what are your thoughts on the Swiss tournament, what do you call it, format? There we go. What do you call thoughts on the Swiss format, Taryn? And is it something you were happy with how it played out, or is it something you kind of would leave by the wayside going forward?
If I'm honest, I would leave by the wayside. I think it, especially for this kind, like what we wanted. Like, sure, we got an overall sense of where teams were, but it just became one, I think, very complicated for everyone to understand. You know, we had a lot of questions. You know, how is this working? Who are we playing against? You know, what happens if this happens? And it's like, it's a little bit awkward, and it's not something that players are used to as well, because we're used to more like the round robin, that kind of stuff. And Swiss, unless you really have a lot, like the teams kind of end
Like
up playing
hundreds of
each
teams,
other. Yeah, and also like end up playing each other multiple times, or like at least once. It doesn't really have a fair representation, because you have some teams who might end up playing against the top three, but you also might have some teams who end up only playing against the bottom three, and we actually have a couple teams that happened to, and it ended up shifting the results in a way. And I think, credit to UG obviously finishing second outright, but in a situation where this is a longer tournament, do UG finish above Beastie Boys? And we can't answer that question, because they never faced each other. So there's no way to know, like, going forward. So in a situation where maybe we have a bit more time, we can get more matches in, yes, the Swiss format would be better. But personally, I wouldn't like to use it again.
Okay. Seems like you agree, Blue.
Yeah, definitely. Swiss is a mess. It works. So the thing that we thought is we can maybe kind of like compress the time period we have to run this in, especially with load shedding. Like, we don't have the capability to run 2 fixtures a week, because, I mean, as it was, teams were barely getting in a practice and a match every week. So we wanted to try and run this. You don't want a seeding tournament to go on for 2 months, and we kind of drew some inspiration from the old open division system, but obviously that's using like 200 teams,
Yeah.
Like, if we think about how we used to go and register and play in open div, it's like that was the kind of pulling off this big this big system of like lots of players, lots of teams that all of very, very wildly different skill levels. And I mean, it doesn't work as well with 13, but it did allow us to get this tournament done quickly, which I think was the eventual appeal of the system, and get a kind of broad outlook of our seeding going into our next tournament.
Yeah, I can understand the logic behind that, and I think the point about load shedding and it all kind of being a mess anyways. Yeah. 2 fixtures a week was 1 fixture was already kind of impossible. So. Right. Anything else you guys wanna talk about, broad strokes about the Power Up Cup, before we jump into actually the nitty gritty of proceedings here?
No, I mean, the only thing I really have to say about it is that it's a credit to our community, that we got anything going at all. Like, honestly, I don't know how we got half these matches going, and the fact that there's always people willing to help out, people willing to take part, is just incredible to see, and it gives me great hope for the rest of the year.
100% agree on that one.
Cool. Well, with all that said, and I mean, at the risk of making this sound a bit self-congratulatory, thanks to the admins as well for putting on everything and making sure it all ran mostly smoothly as we could hope for under the circumstances. I think from the community, I can't speak for many, but hey, from myself as a person who is in the community, thanks to you guys for putting it all together. Now, with all that mushy, horrible stuff out of the way, let's jump into the teams here. So why don't we get a look at the standings here, Peach? And then we can start from the bottom. So here we go. This is our top.
This is the top, Peach.
The top 7. And so that's what that looks like. Spoilers. You weren't following. Right, and here's our bottom 6. Okay, YouTube. We're having some issues with YouTube. We'll try and get that up, or otherwise maybe remote. But this will also be saved as a VOD on the Twitch channel, obviously. And we're looking at maybe getting it set up on Spotify or some other podcast merchants. What do you call it? A podcast platform. Thank you.
There we go.
That you guys can get it in audio form as well. So, yeah, if you can't watch it now because Twitch is it's the worst, then don't worry. Right, so looking at the last team here, we have HSWK A team. Obviously, that's one of our school teams. Who can tell me what that stands for? Since we're in school mode, let's do a pop quiz.
Swerskool Waterkloof.
There we go.
Lovely Afrikaans name for everyone out there.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for this team. They had the worst time. They had Beastie Boys, Ragnarok, and Typo as their fixtures.
Oh my god.
So they were just always up against it. They were always just going to catch a slap from this one. And to their credit, I watched a couple of their VODs. They came out, they performed, they made some good switches, tried to counter it up, but I think it's difficult when you're playing against teams with so much experience on them, and you're just playing against them every single week. Oh man, they just got the pick of the heavy hitters for this tournament.
Oh my god, yeah. Beastie Boys Ragnarok Typo. Jeez. Jeez. There's a W here on their list, but that is the bye. They played against nobody. So not surprising they won that. But this is a new team. Obviously it's a high school team, as the name would suggest. What are your thoughts on kind of, because spoiler alert, but there have been some indications that we might get some more high school teams coming through for the next tournament. So what are you guys' thoughts on kind of high school teams and what they can get done?
Taryn, you're welcome to take this one.
I'm all for it. Like I'm very excited. It's also something that's like you're sitting there thinking, why couldn't my high school do this?
Well, we grew up in the bad old days, Taryn.
Yeah.
I don't know how old you are, but
I mean,
it's over a decade since I was in high school.
Oh, careful, son, careful.
I mean, it's still been, what is it, 5 years now since I was in high school. So it's sometime, it's not a lot. So there was a possibility. But yeah, I'm really excited to see a lot more high school teams. And I mean, you look at, obviously, as we'll get to, is Thomas Moore, who has been a representative of that for quite some time now. And it's just, it gives a lot of joy to see it because it's not something we've had a lot in Overwatch. I mean, you see it sometimes, CSGO, Dota, League, those kind of scenes, but
Rocket League as well.
Overwatch has always been, more of the older generation, like I say, with, sprinkling of, you have like your 13, 14-year-olds, but also they have their own time constraints because, they've got school. And I mean, they did have their issues in this tournament with the way they had to play matches because you can't be up until 11 p.m. on a school night. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited. I'm hoping we get more interest and we can kind of get a bit more of a collaboration going with them, and maybe down the line we get an entire high school league. Yeah.
I mean, that would be the dream, right? But personally, for me, I love seeing high school teams come in here, and we've seen a lot of like high school learners come through and really kind of like, we're seeing players like Trizzle, who started off as part of the old JHM squad when he was in high school. There was a bunch of friends that came up and participated. We see players like that come through, even if it's only like 1 or 2 players per team coming through and like really performing. Like in a couple of years, seeing those players all be top of our leagues, like players, being able to push those high ranks. I mean, seeing them hitting GM, seeing them trying to play for higher level open div teams would be great. So it's something that I personally care a lot about in the time going forward. And there's some irons in the fire there, without spoiling too much.
Yeah, some plate spinning for sure.
But it's something that I'm definitely, it's where we want to grow our community. It's where we want to see people come through and kind of perform and kind of like be productive from there. Because I think there's a lot of growth that can come from there. And there's a lot of like, I mean, we have teams coming through. We have high school teams wanting to register, and I'm really, really excited to see how they participate.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what they can get done. Of course, coming in and getting slapped down by 3 of the best teams in the country straight away is not a great feeling, but I'm sure that they'll stick around and hopefully get some more representative fixtures in the future tournaments. Seeing some love for Team C in the chat here as well, so we'll get to them in just a little bit here. Do we want to pop these boys on our tier list here? Obviously, things are going to move, and just as a reminder, don't read too much into the details of the tier list. It's much more broad strokes. of course, with a team like HSWK, as we've said, who knows? All we can tell for sure is they're not in the top 4 teams in the country. And there's like 13 teams who played in this tournament, so it could be anywhere. But where do we have the tier list here? Ready to go.
There we go.
Okay, well,
There we go.
I mean, if we're looking at our groupings, I mean, I'd say you can't really place a team that finishes at the bottom without winning a map anywhere but the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll place them there to start for sure, and we
So-
can move things around as we go.
But I'd say in the broader strokes of this, it kind of represents teams that are either new or very inexperienced.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think they definitely fall into that. It's the first tournament we've seen them participate in, and even though they came in, they tried some stuff, and they did their best. Honestly, they did some stuff when I was watching some VODs that I wasn't expecting, and was really pleasantly surprised by.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they lost all 3 of their games, and we can't really see any kind of mitigation from that.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a beatdown through no fault of their own. So unfortunately, they are stuck at the bottom there. But I'm really excited to see where this team goes.
And
What do you-
especially after playing against them, you can kind of start to see foundations forming there.
Mhm.
It is this rough edges. Okay, this comp does do well against us, so let's try it. And it definitely shocked me playing against them. You expect a lot of these newer teams often to stick to, this is what we know, this is our comfort heroes, and then you see them swapping to kind of counter what you're throwing at them. It's not something you see very often, and it makes me very excited to see what happens when they get more time, they get more used to, these are the fundamentals of these comps, this is what we can do in situations, even if we are the ones that are being countered, and how do we approach that going forward?
Mhm. Right. So we're happy with HSWK now.
Yeah, I feel bad for them, but it's
Yeah.
the only place we can really put them.
Yeah. Just as well, just to point out that if you're not happy with where you placed us, prove us wrong, basically. And there will be tournaments going forward, and we will come back to these tier lists, and we will fix them. And by the end of the year, they'll be perfect for where teams are at this point. So if you're looking at a team and you're thinking, why is this team there? Firstly, watch the flipping podcast, A, and B, keep watching in the future, and then you can see. Right, so next up we've got Cryptic here, if we take a look at our standings. So Cryptic, just to remind us all of who's on the roster, as he clicks through his 1 billion tabs that he has open, desperately searching for the correct one, which it appears he does not have open, so he's going to fix that quickly. He's filling very effectively here. Professional. Right, Cryptic. So, Tokyo, I presume that's how you say that. Tavikio, Ghost, Narco, Crazy, Malcolm, Cruiser, Zuijan, and Pillock. 11 names, 9 names I've never heard before. Any thoughts on this team? Of course, the results were exactly the same as HSWK, except they don't quite have the mitigating factor of playing exclusively top teams, right? Thomas More, very good. Got 3-0 by them. Eulogy, we saw them play second in the final standings, got 3-0 by them. And against the Gods, who we'll come to a bit later, as you can see there on the standings, got 3-0 by them again. So on paper, based on results exclusively, you'd probably rate them a little bit lower than HSWK. But it's kind of impossible to say, right?
Yeah. Your mic's muted, Blur.
Still muted. There we go.
This is what happens when I type in Twitch chat, everyone. Yeah, I mean, you kind of expect it. Based on relative strength, you maybe think that they're a slightly worse team than HSWK, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
I know they had their fair share of issues, Terran, but I think you were more involved in that process than I was.
Yeah, they were definitely the hardest of the pickup teams to manage, and not because the players were difficult to manage. It's just so many of them have issues with load shedding. These are also, a lot of them were console players, I believe. So it was another new experience for them, and kind of finding a core roster, I think, was near impossible with how much chop and changing they had to go on. I mean, I can recall every week there was always a message, oh, this person from Cryptic can't make it, we're looking for a sub now, and they got the sub, and that's probably why you see so many different players on that roster. But it is very difficult because you can't have a functional team when you have all these players coming in and out. Sure, if that's the goal of the team, you have certain players for certain maps, heroes, whatever, then it's a lot easier to judge. But when these are players who physically can't make those matches because of load shedding or school, whatever, it's going to be very difficult to kind of find where they are. And that's something we hope to see them continue, even if it's not necessarily in this team, at least in other teams, and see them how they progress going forward. And we hope it's in a situation where load shedding doesn't hinder them, which is at this point in time
bold words.
bold one, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, that's awesome. I like to hear that we've got console players getting involved. Competitive everything in South Africa is kind of PC focused, which suits all of us fine. But there's quite a big console market in South Africa that kind of isn't really being catered to as much as far as I can tell. So, yeah, that's exciting to see. Or I guess there's a big 80K Tekken tournament going on, right? And I'm sure that's mostly console focused. Anyways, hopefully we see more of Cryptic, if not as a squad, then at least the players individually. Because that, it kind of, it's kind of the downside of the Swiss tournament again, is you get these 3 games, you get who you get, and then it's kind of hard to tell, were these 3 teams really good and we got dominated, or is this where we belong, near the bottom? So looking forward to seeing in a more representative format how they end up doing. So Cryptic, I think in the same tier as HSWK. Would you put them above or below for what it matters?
I'd say below.
I think below.
I think that HSWK get a pass for playing 3 of the their 3 matches coming against some of the top teams.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The exception being Typo, who finished a little bit lower. But I mean, I've already said, I would expect that Typo would have finished higher. Maybe just getting a little bit of the unlucky kind of draw, the unluck of the draw. But yeah, I'd say that Cryptic are definitely looking like the team that got a little bit battered by by being a little bit more disorganized, being a little bit more maybe not being at the same level as the teams they're playing against. Whereas HSWK, I think potentially we give a pass because they were thrown against people much more experienced than them.
Yeah. Was this a PUG team, Cryptic?
Yes.
Okay, so they were kind of thrown together and you kind of get what you get at that point.
Yeah.
So unfortunate for them, but like I say, hopefully we'll see more from them going forward, or at least some of these players popping up elsewhere if they don't stay together as a unit. Right, taking a look at our next teams here. This is the first team I think we actually saw on stream. Powered Up Possums.
I think it was the second team, but we saw them against XVG Ragnarok, I believe.
Yes. It was.
Okay, yes.
And that was not a close game.
No. Right, this is Scars and Babs and Co. So right, it's Babs, Glue, James, Scars, Cersei, and Milky. So yes, we saw these guys play up against Ragnarok, aka Terran Lord and the Boys and Girls. And it was a very dominant performance from Ragnarok, and their position in the final standings, kind of reflective of what we might have expected based on that single performance.
Yeah, Terran, I think you're the best qualified to talk about this team, I think.
Yeah, it's a very another one of those strange teams where it's a pickup team. You obviously got players that we've seen before. You got Babs, you got Scars, you got James, mixed in with some of the newer blood, and it just didn't really come together for them. Like you could see, there's talent there, and it just was a difficult situation where you don't really have, again, the time to practice. These are teams that are put together like a week or 2 before the tournament, and then you have some players who are unavailable because they've got work. Then there's also the load shedding aspect coming in, maybe schoolwork, whatever it is, and they just didn't really find the time to get that practice in. And it was a bit unfortunate for them because they come in down 0-2 after the second week, and their next 2 fixtures are both buys, so they don't really have any other chance to show anything. And from what I can remember, their first game was against Eulogy as well. So you've got Eulogy and Ragnarok, two teams top of the bracket. You can't really show much going into that. And then they don't have any other chances to show what they can do and potentially get some more practice in.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And I mean, unfortunately, like, it's a team that I think you'd expect a little bit more quality out of. Like, you know, James.
Given the names, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, James was on Vanguard back in the day. Babs has been in innumerable teams. He's the COWZA bicycle for sure, for real. You know, so in Scars, I mean, obviously he's jumped roles a bit, but we've seen him play in the community quite extensively. So it's maybe like, you know, the unknowns, maybe, you know, Milky we've seen for Hullhounds, but they didn't really play a great deal in the local scene. And Cersei completely new to Cersei and Lou completely new to the competitive scene. So you maybe see a little bit less out of that side, but like there's some names that you'd expect to be putting up some performances, putting up some numbers. And you know, to see them finish that low, like below Thomas More, but below against the gods, you know, I'd be pretty disappointed with that if I were them.
Yeah, I have to say though, the fact that they could only play 2 matches is a bit of a kick in the teeth. Like the third match, if it isn't against the way Swiss works, for those who don't know, teams that have similar records will end up playing each other. So if you lose your first 2 games, you're more likely to play against a team who's also lost their first 2 games. So in that sense, it kind of self-balances itself out. And so if you don't get that third game, you just lose 2 games and then your tournament ends and it's like, well, we could have played a team that is also 0-2 and then we can actually see who's, are we actually at the bottom? Because to think about it, we don't know how they stack up to a team like HSWK or Cryptic, the 2 teams we've covered so far. If they 3-0 them, then we can say, okay, they're clearly a cut above them. But without even an opportunity to play them, it's super unfortunate for them. But taking a look at Powered Up Possums then, do we think they're in the same tier as Cryptic and HSWK? Or do we think that just given the strength of the teams, you kind of got to bump them up one? The strength of the names on the team.
I think, like, with the names, you've got to say, just purely off experience alone, not necessarily performance, they've got to be higher. Like, it's got to carry them above, in a way. Even though, especially in their series against us, I feel like they weren't performing as well as they should have. Especially like more on the individual player side, less so, we're looking at team cohesion. So they realistically should be above these 2 teams that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that shows it on the scoreboard, so I'd be inclined to say throw them in the D tier with them.
Yeah.
But we do know enough about these players to be like, they should be doing better than they have.
Technically speaking, if you look exclusively at the scoreboard, they won 2 games and the other teams lost.
They didn't. You mean they didn't play 2 games?
Well, no. That's not what the scoreboard says. The scoreboard says LLWW compared to LWLL and WLLL. So I don't know, man. The numbers don't lie, Blair, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but those TBDs were really close.
Well, they were 3-0s, so there's no evidence to support that.
99 maps.
Have to take your word for it.
No, I think they should be C tier, but I also, just based on the results, they should be D tier. I don't know.
Well, 2 for C, 1 for D, so let's put them in C then. Because I think, Taryn, you agree they're kind of a tier above on paper.
Yeah. On paper, for sure.
Right. So that is 3 teams down, 10 to go. Let's have a look at our lineup once again. And next up is going to be against the gods. So on this squad, we have, drumroll please, website please. Here we go. Right. Respectless, Soup, Spectre K, Crouton, and Fenrir. And they ended with a similar scoreline to Powered Up Possums with 2 wins and 2 losses. Except they actually beat a team, and they beat Cryptic, who is in the penultimate position there. So finally a team with some wins on the board, representative wins on the board, that we can hack into. And this is cool. This is a team with players I've never seen any of them. All 6 of these players are brand new insofar as I can tell.
And it's not a pickup team. It's a team that registered completely of their own volition. So, congrats, guys.
Yeah, that's actually no jokes. That's very cool.
Yeah, no, it's great to see teams come out of nowhere and come in, play some games. And finishing 2-2 is a respectable kind of like outlook. Especially considering they took one game as a 3-0, and they also took a map of Thomas More, which is a team with a little bit of experience.
Yeah, that is very cool. What are your thoughts, Taryn?
Yeah, and also like their series against Thomas More, it was COWZA and Ultrasm's own channel, and they put in a really good performance on the first map. The fourth map was a bit unfortunate to say, but that third map they looked very dominant against Thomas More, who, as you said, a team that's established, that's not only just individual talent, but also a team that's played together for quite some time. So they've got this kind of team dynamics going. So being able to put a performance against a team like that, it shows a lot of promise going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I hope they stick together, and I hope we see more of them. I think the fact that they are a group of 6 or 5 that signed up of their own accord, I think it's a pretty good sign that they'll sign up for the next one. Especially, picking up, there's nothing as motivating as picking up a few Ws. I think we can all agree as people who've all lost so many games in our competitive Overwatch careers. So that's against the gods. Anything else you guys want about them? It's a bit hard when we don't have a sense of the individuals on the team, but this is very impressive. Again, can't understate how impressive it is to take maps of anybody at this level.
I mean, you have to I'd say off results they're probably still in that C tier as well, but above Powered Up Possums because they actually won the game.
Yeah.
But more specifically, that we saw some really strong performances come out of them, and we saw them, for our first tournament, I remember getting slapped in my first couple of games. So I'm really for them to come in and win 2, good, or win 1 and get the maps off a team a team with some structure and some coaching. Good for them.
Yeah. And especially since it took me over a year to actually win a map in the tournament. So
show off, eh? Jeez.
Big congratulations. Definitely didn't have to move teams just for that to happen.
Oh my god. Shots fired. Okay, so Powder Possums, against the gods, we think C tier, a cut above Powder Possums. We might move them into B tier if B tier is empty and A tier is empty. But we'll see when we get there. Right, next up, a team that actually has some bite to it. Surprised to see them so far down, I think. And that is, wrong way around. Next up is a team we've spoken about so many times already in relation to other teams, but it is Thomas More, second and final, I think, high school team, coached by none other than Trizzle of Beastie Boys fame, I think. And managed, I guess, by Altruism, whose voice you'll have no doubt heard if you've spent any time here in competitive Overwatch South Africa. This is a team with a lot of obviously young, new players, but a couple of standouts in their match that we saw. And it's also a team that we've got a lot of footage on because Altruism was casting a lot of their games just on his channel, not privately, but unofficially.
Yeah.
But it's Super BH, Shadow, Nethermat, Mole, Kidakong, Dobby, Valky, sorry, and Altruism is listed here as a player. I think he did end up standing.
To see Altruism play
I think he
Overwatch.
stood in one game.
Oh man,
he was going to. He ended up not.
I would pay money to see Altruism on a cast in game.
We were going to cast that. That's one of the games that we had lined up to cast. Fluffy and Peach and I were sitting ready to go. And then because of an internet problem that was, as far as we can tell, not related to load shedding, they ended up having to move that match the next day. It ended up being a 3-2, I think, as well. And so that was a disappointing one. But Thomas More, a team who I think performed very well, given how new this team is.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken a lot about them, but it's really a success of the community of their own work and performance to see them come through, also finishing with a 2-2 record, putting up some good results as well. Unfortunately falling 3-2 to Hatchlings, otherwise they could have been in that 3-1 scrap for the top spots. And I mean, maybe once they kick Trizzle and get a better coach, they'll be getting those wins. But
coach on coach violence here.
But genuinely, like a very, very impressive set of performances from them, and I'm really excited to see what goes next for this team.
So just to confirm the results there, as you mentioned, Blur, it was 2 wins, 2 losses. They went 3-0 against Cryptic, as we've mentioned. They went 3-2 against Hatchlings, or 2-3 rather, so they ended up losing that one. Very tight match. And then they beat against the Gods 3-1, as we mentioned. And then, of course, they got defeated by Terran and the boys and girls of XVG Ragnarok. So, an impressive performance, beating teams near the lower end of the field. Again, like you mentioned, though, that one map against Hatchlings could have made such a huge difference.
I mean, they would have been in it. They would have been in the big title scrap, or the big prize money scrap at the top there if they'd won that match. Which Terran and the boys unfortunately fell out of, but we'll get there in a bit. But yeah, definitely like a team that we've seen around a bit, and we've seen a lot of these players before. Super BH being one that we're quite familiar with for his just absolute dominant style of tank play, and Shadow coming through as well as a very consistent, very prolific DPS player for that team. So I mean, there's definitely some players we recognize. There's definitely some performances we recognize, and to see them kind of like starting to establish themselves almost as like a gatekeeper team. We used to talk about the teams that were like in the 6 to 8 spots in the Premier divisions in VS as like the gatekeeper teams, the teams that stopped other teams reaching the top level if they weren't ready. And it looks like they're gearing up to be one of those teams and even start to push their own way up into those higher spots, and that's really promising for them.
I'm just looking in the chat here, and Shadow says that they would have beat Hatchlings if he'd been playing, but he wasn't able to play. And that, I mean, that is something to be aware of for all of these results. We can't tell just from the player listing who played and who didn't, if they've got more than 5 players on their roster, which most of these teams will. And with load shedding and everything, you kind of have to move a lot of pieces. We don't know what the best of these teams looks like and if they pitched up for a particular game. So there's a lot of caveats for A, these results, and then obviously B, how we're interpreting them. So yeah, Terran, looking at the wow, my brain has just left me there for a moment. The tier list. This team feels a tier above the C team tiers.
I definitely think that, like, B tier for sure. Especially playing against them, it was a 3-0, but wasn't, we show up one and done. We had to work for each and every map, and I mean, I said it to a couple people after it. Like, I genuinely felt out of breath from calling, because every fight felt like it was losable for us. And if we weren't on top of our game, then we would have lost this fight. And we did lose a lot of fights, and it was a difficult struggle against them. I mean, Dorado came down, I think, to the final fight. So they're a very promising team, and just losing out to Hatchlings, who's another team which we'll get to, is very promising.
Absolutely. And of course, a team with a lot of power behind them, as we said. We've got Altruism, who's well established in the community, obviously, and then they've got Trizzle as well as a coach. Most of these teams don't have dedicated coaches, so that stands them in good stead going forward, I think, Blur.
No, definitely. There's a lot of promise for this team, and I mean, we just hope to see them grow from here. Hope to see the core of their roster kind of stay together. Which, I mean, as a school team, you'd hope they will. That people won't just start ditching their school team. But yeah, that one specifically references our esteemed producer Peach.
And Overclocked Gaming,
Overclocked Esports. Anyway.
In the good old days. Right. Let's take a look at our next team up here. You guys don't have anything to add anymore about Thomas More. I think one of the teams alongside against the Gods who we're going to keep an eye on in a big way.
Definitely.
Right. So next up, we've got another team who we thought was going to do pretty well. I think it's safe to say, given the roster, but ended up here in the bottom 6, and that's Typo. So looking at their squad, it's Cubic, formerly of Overclocked.
Rage Odyssey as
Rage Quit
well.
Odyssey as well, yeah. European tank player, if memory serves. Cerulean Wolf, who I think coached that same Overclocked squad for like 2 weeks, apparently.
Getting the lore in our ears here.
Yeah. It just so happens that there's a heavy Overclocked presence in this team. But anyways, we've got Phoenix, a fellow Phoenix, of course, formerly a member of DDC Divinity. I think. Then
Also Odyssey.
Also Odyssey.
We're gonna notice some themes here, friend.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm picking up on something, and look who's next. Oh, it's Luke. What team did he play for?
Odyssey and Overclock.
And then we've got Smiley, kind of a standout here. Was on Odyssey for a while, I believe.
Nope.
Was she not?
She was never on Odyssey.
Man. Talking of village bicycles, I feel like everybody passed through Odyssey at one point.
I believe she did. She tried for Odyssey at some point, so there is a link there.
Okay.
If we want to push it.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously a very established player in her own right, winning the league with BBA last year.
Yeah.
So
I think less impressive, other than less important anything that happened before Evo and then her joining Beastie Boys again.
Yeah. But I mean, she was on that BBA team. She was on Evo, and then previously Leiden and Chronic Underdogs, which I mean that is a name.
Leiden, dude.
She was on Leiden. She was in the same year I was on Leiden.
Yo, you were on Leiden.
I was on Leiden.
Oh my god, dude, Leiden. Flashbacks.
Yeah. That one actually got to top 8.
Wow, dude.
Shots fired. Holy, dude.
Oh, so you okay? Look, one of us won a tournament, and one of us didn't even qualify for that same tournament. So let's not pretend that. Okay, for context, if you're newish to the community, I was on Leiden for many years. It's the team I started my career on, and the team I ended my career on when they were Phoenix Rising way back in the day. That was my baby. I was captain, and we didn't win anything, and we were pretty not good. But then I retired, and then they got better. So read into that what you will. But yes, Leiden, it's memories, all these memories, good and bad, flashing back. And then Blur joined them for like 8 minutes or whatever. And
8 minutes?
Yeah,
it was a few months. It was a few months.
So, right. The names on the squad, there's a lot to talk about. Cubic, probably one of the better tanks in the country.
Definitely.
You know, he's European, but he plays on the same ping that we do when he plays in our tournaments.
Yeah.
Strong players, Phoenix, Smiley, a pretty strong support line. Luke, decent, if not top tier DPS. And then Cerulean Wolf, don't know much about them. But this is a team that for the first time, we recognize all the names on this roster. And the second thing is that they've all got decent competitive experience. So 6th place is a little bit unexpected, I think. And then just to run through the results, it's loss, win, loss. So 2 losses, 2 wins. They went 3-2 against Beastie Boys, that's a result that surprises me, given where they ended up. And then they lost to Five Nights at Freddy's 3-0, and then they beat HSWK 3-0 as well. And then their third match was a bye. So looking at the results, not bad actually, but they kind of ended up pretty low down in the standings.
Yeah, and I think that's loss to Five Nights at Freddy's, and the nature of that loss to Five Nights at Freddy's really kind of hammers down why they ended there. Because I mean, that first game we saw them play against Beastie Boys, it was a back and forth game. The teams were trading hits, and it was really, really close. But then they got to that Five Nights at Freddy's game, which unfortunately we didn't get to cast. But that ends up being a beatdown for Five Nights at Freddy's. Obviously a team with a lot of other big names. But, if you're putting up that performance against the team that ended 3rd, you're expecting to put up that performance against the team that ends 4th as well. And it just felt like they didn't come out with that same kind of energy, that presence that we know they can do, because they have the players, they have the quality to do so. So I definitely say it's a case of an underperforming team. I definitely say it's a team that we should be seeing higher up, but they didn't deliver the performances that would have got them there.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, Taryn?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is definitely a team that you can even expect to beat the likes of Beastie Boys and Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, these are not games where you say they're the complete underdogs. Like, maybe you expect Beastie Boys and Five Nights to win those games, but they should be very close. These are players that we've seen in the scene for a very long time, have been on the business end in a lot of situations, and they have the individual performances to do so. And not only that, these are players who know each other very well. They've either been on teams together, or they play a lot of Overwatch comp, or just even other games together. And it's very surprising to see them fall in a 3-0 to Five Nights. I mean, I remember going into it expecting it to be a 2-hour slugfest. It basically comes down to 99-99.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it wasn't that. Obviously, we don't know what happened in those games and what really caused that, but it's something we've got to expect more from this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think couldn't agree more. So looking at our tier list here once again, we almost feel like we need another tier here because, again,
it's going to get too
Typo
clustered at the top there already.
Typo feels a step above Thomas More, right? At least in my head. Oh, yeah. We can just do that. We can just magic up new tiers. So is that
production magic, everyone?
Yeah, I don't. Who knows how it's done? You sprinkle some production dust on the production tools, and then magic happens. Right? Are you guys in agreement with that? That they're a bit of a step above, or do you think they're kind of in the same zone as Thomas More?
I think the players are, but the performances weren't. I don't think the team deserves to be in a tier above Thomas More. Thomas More is
love here from Blair.
Thomas More is a team that we're praising for their performances. Typo's a team we're saying had really poor performances comparatively. I don't think it's fair to put Typo above Thomas More in tiers then.
Yeah.
Maybe in the division, yeah, sure. But I think they should be C tier because that's what they performed.
Yeah. And sure, this is definitely something, down the line we can say we were wrong, right? This is definitely a team that will perform, or we expect to perform better, and they not only even go to B tier, potentially pushing S tier. But it's unfortunate that they didn't show the performances that they should. If this is a situation where they go 3-2 against Five Nights, we're probably looking at not even putting them B, but probably A tier. Because then that's performances against two teams that are inside the top 4. And top 4, you're realistically looking at AS tier teams. But because they lack that performance, and their only other game is against, one of the weaker teams, there's nothing much to say about that.
Okay, so we're settled here on top of C tier of the two teams with C tier?
I think top of C tier is a fair representation of how they performed in this tournament.
But a team we're looking forward and expecting a bit more from based on their roster. Were they a Pike team as well?
No. Typo is they've played in European context before, and this iteration of Typo is just a group of players that have played together or friends, and they formed themselves.
Cool. So unfortunate for them, but fingers crossed they can make some magic happen going forward. So that's our bottom half here, our bottom 6 sorted out. So now we're looking forward to our top 7 here, 13 teams in tournament as well. And we start with Hatchlings here in 7th place. Another team now that we've spoken about a couple of times in reference to other teams. They ended up going 2 wins, 2 losses. Looking at the roster here, it's Mr. Tropica, Dr. Bionic, Bacon Gamer YouTube, so go check him out on YouTube, I guess. Dixie, Irison, X-Dragon Z, Vandermeer, and Frostitute. Frostitute, of course, casted a game with me and Peach the other day. So of the 8 or so names on this list, the only one I recognize. But looking at their performances, they had a bye first week. They beat Thomas More 3-2, as we mentioned earlier. They got 3-0'd by the Beastie Boys, and they got 3-0'd by Eulogy. So the team in 2nd and 3rd, they got 3-0'd by as well. But then they did end up taking a tight game against Thomas More. So a team in the middle here, which is kind of what you'd expect based on their performances, but a roster full of unknown players.
I mean, this is Smiley's project.
Okay.
And she filtered a few players from the pickup team system, and I mean they performed really well for what they were expected to achieve, right? Like another fresh team coming in, another fresh team putting themselves out there, and with lots of really new players. 2-2, very, very, very respectable record to come out of this type of tournament with, especially considering you played second and third, you know?
Yeah.
I'd be pretty happy with that if I were them. And I think, they have a lot to be proud of with that.
That 3-2 victory over Thomas More, I think, obviously the standout performance for this squad. What are your thoughts on them as well, Terry?
Yeah, no, definitely coming in as a fresh team, playing against a team that's more established. Of what you would like to say, individual skill-wise, probably very similar. Coming out the victors in that game shows a lot. You know, they still have obviously a long way to go in terms of team synergy, getting down what they're used to in terms of compositions, what they're all comfortable on together as a team. And there's a lot of foundations in place to help them. So the fact that they're already showing what I would like to say progress, because I don't think going into this we expected them to be better than Thomas More, but they have beaten Thomas More. So that means that showing progress that no one really expected, which means going forward, this is a team that we could look at potentially pushing even higher.
Of course, just always to remember the various caveats that come with these results. We heard from Shadow earlier that Thomas More didn't have their main roster, but what they do have that I don't know that Hatchlings has is a dedicated coach. So obviously Smiley we're keeping an eye on them, I'm sure giving them tips, but I don't know that
they do have a coaching setup in place from what I'm aware.
Never mind then. I take it all back. So very impressive stuff from Hatchlings. I think coming out ahead of a lot of teams we might have expected to be better based on the rosters they have. But where do we think they line up here on our tier list? Do we think I hesitate to put them a tier above Thomas More and Typo, just given that they did have that very, very close match with Thomas More, and they ended up ahead of them.
It's a map difference, right? A map difference, and they kind of swap around. So I think, throwing them in top of C tier makes sense with their placements, makes sense with their finish, and is fair representation of the performance they had in this tournament.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Although I'm looking at this Typo squad, man, and that 3-2 against Beastie Boys. I don't know. It makes me feel like if we threw Thomas More or Hatchlings up against Beastie Boys, would we expect to see like even a vague level of parity between those two teams? But anyways, you think so?
No, I wouldn't expect to see a parity, but I think it's a reflection on the rest of Typo's tournaments that they weren't able to build on that.
Okay, fair enough.
Which I think means that they have to sit in that C tier because they didn't build on what was an extremely promising result.
Fair enough. I don't know why I'm on this Typo train. Like, I know, guys, we're going to be talking about the first team and be like, yo, but
Typo though.
So that is Hatchlings. Again, another awesome thing to see. A team full of new players under the wing of Smiley, performing very well. So let's take a look at our team here in 6th place. That is going to be Blackwatch. So now we've taken a step up, in my opinion, into some heavy hitters here. We saw Blackwatch. Our first match of XVG Ragnarok was against Blackwatch, and I can see a cheeky smile there on Terran Lord's face, because he's gonna catch some strays here.
He ate that. He sat through that VOD review.
Yeah,
he sat through that VOD review.
Got absolutely demolished by Blackwatch. I can say that since you're both here. I was difficult to watch / cast, because when you it's one of the hard games to cast where one team seems to be outclassed by their opponents. But thankfully for you guys, we got to see you the next week up against Powered Up Possums, and you looked as dominant as you did in losing against Black. So cool. We'll get to you guys in a bit, though. If you're paying attention, you'll see we'll come up to Ragnarok and we'll spend some time on that one. But Blackwatch, a team I started off being very impressed by, based on that match we saw against Ragnarok. And taking a look at their roster here quickly, it is Honey, exclamation mark Owl, who I think was going by Deadly in game.
Yeah.
Vertigo, who you'll all be very familiar with, Lavius, Alvin Slayer, Mo Sama, and Damien. I think we saw Damien and Deadly in for the most. Lavius and Deadly in the DPS lineup. Obviously, Vertigo running at support, and then Alvin Slayer, Vertigo and Honey on support, Alvin Slayer as tank. So this is a team that you'd be like, should be fighting P1, P2 here, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking like at that DPS line just immediately, Lavius.
Look, we didn't know anything about
terrifying,
this, right?
I mean, we knew that he was a GM DPS.
Okay, sure.
So that he's so bad you're gonna be right. And I mean, Alvin Slayer, obviously a tank with a lot of strength and a lot of strength in this individual tank role. So there's a couple of players there that you're already expecting big things from. Vertigo, obviously a very strong support as well as Honey coming in and playing really well in her favorite picks. So it's a situation where it's a team that, like, I was so surprised to see them end sixth. I know they did have some internal issues, which did manifest a little in the COWZA channels, but it's a team of players that realistically I think we should have been seeing fight for those top 4 spots, and it just it was a story that wasn't to be.
Yeah, looking at the results, Taryn, before I get your perspective here, it's just, what is happening? It's so they went 2-2, no buys. They 3-0'd Ragnarok, they 3-0'd Eulogy, then they got 3-0'd by Blackwatch, and they got 3-0'd by Five Nights at Freddy's. So you can kind of see Inglourious Blasters. What did I say?
You said they got 3-0'd by Blackwatch.
Okay.
They got in their own heads and lost.
I'm stuck on Ragnarok, bro. That's my whole perspective. Is they got 3-0'd by Blackwatch. 3-0'd by Inglourious Blasters. So I mean, you look at who they played. They also kind of got dominated a bit by the format, where they won their first game, won their second game, and now they're at the top, fighting with the top 2, or the top X, and they lost to Inglourious Blasters and Five Nights at Freddy's. So they just exclusively played top 5 teams.
Yeah.
And had wildly different results.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair. What are your thoughts on Blackwatch as a person who had to deal with them, Terran Lord?
Playing against them was painful, and you could see a lot of their individual skill shining, which I think shows a lot in their results as well. Yeah. When we look at, obviously them playing against us as well as Eulogy, the 2 games that they won, when you compare individual skill, those 2 rosters don't compare. It's not really something you can say. Whereas you look at Inglourious Bastards and Five Nights, on an individual skill level, you probably say both Inglourious Bastards and Five Nights are better. And it's like, but it's close. But then you think, okay, Inglourious Bastards, Five Nights at Freddy's, they have a lot more time together and a lot more experience at least playing together, even if they don't necessarily practice as much. So as teams, they probably have a bit more structure to them. Whereas you look at Blackwatch, we're playing our comforts. So when you're playing your comforts against a team that either matches you in skill or is slightly better, you're probably gonna face the rough end of it. And based on the players, you would like to see them do better, and I felt like they should have. Maybe not necessarily against Inglourious Bastards, because that roster, it shows, their results show they are a step above everyone else. But Five Nights at Freddy, going into that, I expected a 3-1, 3-2, and sometimes you have 3-0s which are close, but from what we've heard of it, it wasn't a close 3-0. Granted, there were some other circumstances, but
there's allusions to these other circumstances that I am not aware of, that something tells me you can't go into, but okay, I'll take that under advisement. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, it's just, it is very unfortunate to see a team with a lot of promise not really put out the results in those final 2 matches. The beatdown, obviously, on the initial stream, it's very good for them. You win that 3-1, but again, US Eulogy are the second place team. But as we'll look at later, they're probably not the team you expect to be in that position. So winning that match is expected. Coming out of those other 2 with that kind of beatdown, you're not happy.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Taking a look at the tier list then here, are we moving up a step here now? Right, we just placed hatchlings at the top of C tier. My instinct, Blur, is that if I was to cast a match between Blackwatch and hatchlings, I'd be expecting tears and domination. Right?
I would not be expecting a close match. If Blackwatch come in with their heads right.
Okay, now hear me out here. Typo versus Blackwatch, though. Right?
I mean, maybe.
Right?
Like, maybe that's a good game. Maybe it's not. Who knows?
I'm just saying. What's more likely? Hatchlings versus Blackwatch being 3-2 Slagfest, or Typo versus Blackwatch?
Yeah, based on their performance in this tournament, it's Hatchlings versus Blackwatch, yeah.
Oh, wow, dude. Well, he's consistent. You can't argue with that, right? Sorry,
But
Blackwatch.
I would definitely agree with you that Blackwatch is veering into B tier territory, simply because the nature of their games, they played against all the good teams, And I think their dip in performance aside, they're a team you're expecting to be up there. They're a team that should have done better than they did. I think they should be fighting for A and S tier spots, but to put them in B tier is fair.
Okay. You agree, Terran?
Yeah.
For Blackwatch?
Definitely. Obviously there's a debate that you could have with Typo and everything, but Blackwatch are a team I feel, even on paper, outmatch them. I think overall their individual skill level outperforms, and it's very difficult to argue when their result against Beastie Boys didn't match that of Typos, but they have come into this playing against 2 of the better teams and got the results. And you can't really go on what ifs a lot of the time. You have to go, this is the results that we presented, and they shone in 2 of those 4 games.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm kind of only half joking when I'm popping up Typo here. Right, so Blackwatch, our first team in B tier. Let's take a look at our team in 5th place. Let's go, finally. It is going to be XVG, Extreme Vision Gaming Ragnarok. Alrighty, boyos. Top 5. Look, you can't. Okay, let's be professional about this, right? Who's on XVG Ragnarok? Some individual by the name of Terran Lord. Okay, whoever that guy is. And we've got KK Rangahanga.
Link.
Is that Rinku?
Yeah, it's Rinku.
Cyberblade, Rexu, and Restio-san. On paper, some very strong players on the squad. A ton of experience at the very least. Of course, what's not written here is Coach Blur, but we know that to be the case as well. This is a team with coaching. This is a team who formed quite early, as I understand it. Also, not written here is manager Peach Sere as well.
There's a lot of XVG Ragnarok representation on this podcast.
I'd like to say, for the record, I have no relation to XVG Ragnarok whatsoever.
You want a trial? Looking for a new tank.
Actually, I don't. Oh, you're getting rid of your tank. You'll rip that, dude.
Yeah.
Right. So
some shitter. Oh, sorry. Can't say that.
We've got Terran Lord on the tank, of course, formerly DPS, moved into the tank role very recently. You guys formed in October last year? Is that true? Sorry. This team formed in
I would like to say around the late November, if my memory serves.
So started recruiting end of October, started playing in November. Okay. sorry. There's a conversation happening with a person you can't hear right now. Okay?
Peach is getting very defensive
Yeah,
right
Peach is
now.
like setting us straight to his damn team. Right. So I think this is a player whose players rank somewhere in the middle for me. Not at the tippy top of players. If I was to rank the tanks, Terran Lord wouldn't be the first tank I put there. No offense to Terran Lord. I think Terran Lord himself would agree with me. The support line, KK, Cyberblade, Restiosan, again, not in the top tier of supports. DPS, I think Rexu, for me, a standout player, but again, not necessarily. I wouldn't put him up alongside the likes of Alavius and, that kind of thing. And then Rinku as well, similar to Lavius. So, but what you guys, from watching your game against Powered Up Possums, what you guys have that other teams appear not to have as much of is a really, really strong sense of identity in your playstyle and a synergistic expertise that a lot of teams appear not to be putting the same amount of focus on. Now, it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion, because we saw against Blackwatch that you can sometimes be a little bit inflexible based on that match. And if you can make that work, like you did against Powered Up Possums, it looks clean, it looks amazing. Against Blackwatch, kind of left you floundering a bit. But I think at the end of the day, the results kind of reflect pretty well where you sit in the sort of power rankings here. Now, is that something you'd agree with, Terran Lord? All of the assessment I just put out there into the world?
Yeah,
Or do you think I'm misguided on some of my rulings here?
I think so. Like, if I'm completely honest, our game against Blackwatch should have been better. I think from an individual point of view as well as a team point of view. I mean, we went through it in VOD review. We didn't execute in the way that we realistically should have, and we should have made that match look a lot closer. Even though we were very rigid in what we were going for, it's what we had been practicing, what we realistically should have been comfortable with, and we just didn't really get the execution going. I would like to say that first map was definitely our best showing and the cleanest we were during the series, but even then it wasn't clean enough.
Okay. Coach Blur, how do you feel Ragnarok performed based on your expectations as somebody who knows the squad better than anybody, and B, the strength of the teams around them?
Yeah, do you want the PG version?
No, but I think we need the PG version.
Yeah, I don't want this to be absolutely
technically,
kicked off
you
the
get to
platform.
decide here COWZA's output, right? So.
I suppose I do, but I think we stick to the PG version. I think the schedule flatters Ragnarok a little bit. It's worth noting that while they do go 3-1 in this tournament and are good value for that 3-1 based on the results they did put out, the teams they played against were generally on the lower end of the table. Powered Up Possums, HSWK, and Thomas Moore being the 3 victories. So, as much as I obviously want this team to perform very well for completely selfish reasons. I do think it took them a while to get their gear and to find their rhythm as a team. And I do think that is still a process that we're going through. But I think that it's the system is in place. The rhythm of this team is in place. They, as you say, have a clear identity. They're moving in the right direction. But there's just there's been moments where there's a lack of focus, a lack of kind of clarity, and sometimes just like a lack of discipline, which we've come through in those cast games and kind of swing fights against them. And I mean, that's, I think, as fair an assessment as I can give of the team without being extremely toxic to the players. I have to then go and VOD review next week.
Yeah, well, you got fuel to use against them the next time they play bad. So yeah, Ragnarok. Okay, looking at, just to run through those for posterity, it was that 3-0 against Ragnarok that we saw, against Blackwatch, that we saw to open up the tournament, or the second match of the tournament. Then they beat Ragnarok beat Powered Up Possums 3-0. You then beat HSWK 3-0, and then you beat Thomas More 3-0. So again, kind of as you were saying there, Blur, a consequence of the Swiss format. You lost your first game, and you ended up going against the teams that had also lost their first game, which ended up being, in this case, Powered Up Possums, and then HSWK coming off a victory, I think. Or no, they didn't win any games. So it's weird. You kind of got dropped to the bottom of the log area, and then you just hanged out there for the rest of the tournament, beating the lower skill teams. So, with all that in mind, let's place you here on our tier list. Now, B for Blackwatch. Is it B for Ragnarok as well, or A?
I don't think we can put them in a different tier, right?
Yeah, I don't feel like you're a tier above when you got spanked down so hard by the team, right?
I think B tier below Blackwatch is fair because we played against them. Like there's obviously a result to show there, and they showed in that match that they were better than us. But obviously, in terms of results, you can't really. I mean, you compare it. You're directly below Hatchling versus Ragnarok. Hatchling's 3-2 against Thomas More, whereas we won 3-0. It's like just purely off results. We are a step above in that sense.
Now hear me out. I think you know where I'm going with this. Typo versus Ragnarok.
There's C tier.
That feels like a close.
There's C tier, son.
Right? It feels like a close. I'm just saying. Oh, we don't have to move them. I just like to point these things out. Just make sure we're considering everything here.
It should conceptually be a close match, considering a lot of those players come from the same teams.
Yeah, well, then why are you not in the same tier here, my guy? But anyways. Right, so Ragnarok, a step below Blackwatch, but a step above Hatchlings. And
I think it would be fair to say a step below start of Tournament Blackwatch. Before, like, pre-capitulation.
I see. Okay. I get you. So you think if you played the pieces that remain of Blackwatch in the future, it'll probably be a pretty close matchup, or you'd take it. Right. So that's P5. Taking a look here at our fourth place team, it is going to be none other than 5 Knights at Freddy's. Knights as in Knights in armor, not knights like the video game.
It makes a really bad acronym.
Yeah.
It's just not good.
Yeah.
It's just not good. Change it.
Unlucky, guys, unlucky. We didn't cast them coincidentally, but that's the kind of thing you start saying on cast and you go, oh no, wait, no. Don't say that. Right, 5 Knights at Freddy's. Stalker is their main tank, very active in the chat here. Nice to see you, Stalker. We've got Larina, Jesper Swag, Fluffy, Raftalia, and Nauru. There are so many names I don't recognize here. Are these people using different names, or are these new players? Like Jesper Swag, Raftalia, Nauru. Not familiar with.
So there's a couple I don't recognize, and it's difficult to say these things because we didn't actually see 5 Nights at Freddy's play.
That's true.
Well, of the players we do know, right? We know Stalker probably near the top of tank players when he was at his peak, right? When he was playing for
Beastie Boys again, won the league.
Beastie Boys again, there you go, right? One of the best tanks in the country at a period.
Undoubtedly, yeah.
Fluffy, one of the best flex support in the country, no question about that. Spent a lot of time on 2CP, I think, with you, Blur.
Very briefly with me, but a lot of time on 2CP nonetheless.
Sorry, yes, with Stalker actually.
Yeah, with Stalker most of that. And then Enigma with me and Stalker as well.
Sorry, Enigma, not 2CP. Yes. Then we've got Larina, a name I'm familiar with, but I can't place.
Used to play for Evo, took a break, and is now appeared.
Okay. So a team with decent experience. I think the front and the back of this team is incredible. Stalker, Fluffy, 2 players that could slot in on any top tier team without any issues.
Yeah.
But in the juicy middle, we don't quite know how they stack up, but taking a look at their performances, we can get a good sense of that. Started off with a bye, 3-0 against nobody, and then they lost 3-0 against our eventual winners, Inglourious Blasters. They then beat Typo 3-0, and then they beat Blackwatch 3-0 pre or post capitulation Blackwatch, choose to say. So a team with 3 W's.
From what we
and-
know about that game, it's post-capitulation, by the way.
Okay, I see. I get you. Right. So 2 W's at 1 W at least against Typo. Kind of a team that on paper you'd expect to end up quite high, but maybe not right at the top.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a couple of players that we don't know there, but again, I doubt that they're recruiting players below their level. So if you're expecting that they're playing at the level of Stalker and Fluffy, and from our experience of Arena, like you're expecting that it's a team of, you know, Master CGM players that can play at a very, very competitive level and can play in a very synergized manner as well. So I'd say that their finish is about consistent with that as a new team of very talented players that, you know, next we're looking to build on this performance in future tournaments.
Mm-hmm. You agree with that, Tyrion?
Yeah, and I mean, they had quite difficult games as well. When you look at, obviously, we've spoken a lot about both Typo and Blackwatch, and you know, both those teams, you know, needing to perform better. But at the same time, you know, in a game, there's 2 sides to it. You know, sure, if a team's not performing as well, you still need to, as the dominant team, need to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave those performances, and they got the results. And that shows that they're definitely a team that is going to be fighting for, you know, those top 4 places, and they fought already. But this is a team that we could potentially see challenging Glorious Bastards, you know, going forward. And it's not a surprise, I think, to see them get 3-0'd. Again, Inglourious Bastards are the team to beat. So it's never going to be a thing of, oh, you lost 3-0 to Inglourious Bastards, how? It's a situation where you could probably perform your best, and that still can happen.
Yeah.
So they've got the results, you know, fair play to them. And, you know, potentially if we see them against Beastie Boys, that's another series we're thinking maybe it could go either way. So them finishing in that 4th spot, it's very much a fair representation of where we expect them to be.
I get you. So, question of the hour. If we take a look at our tier list here, do we think that this squad is a step above Blackwatch and Ragnarok, or
Yes.
on the same level?
Yeah.
Definitely. I think Five Nights at Freddy's is our first A-tier team.
Yeah, without a
Okay.
doubt.
This come together quite nicely, I have to say. We got a pretty good spread here.
It's going to get
after-
controversial, I'm calling it. The fight for S tier is going to get spicy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Hold your horses there, Blur. We'll get there. Right. So we've got Five Nights at Freddy's as our first A-tier team. Hard not to agree that they're better than a team that probably doesn't exist anymore, and Ragnarok. So, having a look at our 3rd place team, I believe we're on now. It is going to be a team we've seen play for years now in some iteration or another, right? When was it? 2020. They were in the ATK Overwatch tournament in the grand finals versus ATK.
Yeah, as
And
Beastie Boys again.
No, that was as Beastie Boys, wasn't it?
Beastie Boy. Oh, in ATK, yes. Sorry,
Yes,
my mistake.
ATK. Yeah, and they got slapped down by ATK, but no shame in that. Literally everybody did. And then in the next year, they were in the finals against Beastie Boys again. Or were they not? No,
They
you
were
guys in the
Beastie Boys again against Enigma. The other Beastie Boys roster finished 3rd.
Yes, right. So this Beastie Boys is the team that was Beastie Boys again.
Bits of it.
Right, it's a mixture.
Mesh of the
We'll
two.
get into that, okay?
Yeah.
So roster-wise, looking at Beastie Boys, we've got Shapeshifter slithering his way back into the Overwatch team here, formerly of ATK, high school ATK fame, with Squishy and Mikulele, who I saw at the shop the other day. That was a weird experience. Not because there's anything weird about him, just wasn't expecting it. It was nice to see him. Anyway, that's besides the point.
Anecdotes with Sun.
Yeah, there you go. You don't get to hear much about IRL Sun, but there you have it. He goes to the shop sometimes and he sees other people. Trizzle, of course, a player we've mentioned a few times now in relation to Thomas Moore, the team he coaches. A ultra strong DPS player. We saw them play in that last match against the eventual winners of the tournament, Inglourious Blasters. We've got Kirik N, don't know anything about them. We've got Squishy, now in the flex support role. Probably up there with Fluffy as one of the better flex supports in my opinion. We've got Wallace, one of the more well-known Lucio players in the scene, it has to be said, in that main support or whatever you want to call it these days role. We've then got Metal Snow, spent a lot of time alongside Trizzle as part of the JHM squad and whatever that ended up morphing into. I can't remember off the top of my head. Team Mist, that's right. He was captain of that team and also flex support, I want to say. Then we've got Like Luke. If you don't know who that is, you're new. Welcome. It's nice to have you. One of the maybe the best flex DPS in the country. If you compare players at their peak. Then you've got Nyan, also a DPS player, also part of that old Team Mist JHM squad. And then you've got Visions, who I don't know that he ended up playing at all, but like one of the best players in the country on balance as a support. Was part of the original Eden squad, if you want to cast your mind back all the way there. He was on Goliath Gaming with Ubler in 2018, I think it was. When
2019,
won,
but yeah.
2019, when you won VS Gaming's tournament that they do. He was on Beastie Boys. He's the father of Beastie Boys. He started the team. So it was always up there. But again, I think the focus was less on him as a player in this tournament. On paper, an ultra strong roster. And then if we take a look at the results, kind of reflective of that, 3 Ws, 1 L. 3-2 against Typo. Just want to dwell on that for a second here. Then 3-0 against HSWC. 3-0 against Hatchlings. How did they end up playing these teams? But anyway. And then 3-2 against Inglorious Blasters. We obviously Blur, you and I and Peach got to cover that match. Awesome match. Back and forth. Was it almost a reverse sweep, or was it a reverse sweep?
It was a reverse sweep for Inglorious Blasters. Once they kicked into gear, they never came back.
The squad, and they just the composition. Sorry, the chaotic brawling style still coming back to me now. And PC Boys didn't really have an answer for that. So sign of weakness there for the Beastie Boys. But looking at the squad, I mean, this is a top 2 squad in my opinion, even if they didn't finish in the top 2 here.
It is a phenomenal squad, and I mean, credit to them for taking that Inglorious Blasters squad, which is a super squad, if we can have such a thing in South African Overwatch. They taking it into such a close match. However, I think their inflexibility is a big mark against them. Seeing them have to like play that rush style into the ground, even on a map like Dorado, where it just wasn't functional, wasn't a viable way to play the game, and struggled so much through the later stages of that game because they just simply could not match up to the way Inglorious Blasters were playing a more spam-oriented style, a style that was more functional against their comp. You know, that puts a big red mark against them on my list. And like, although you have that quality, you have very dated quality. You have players like Luke, Squishy, and Shapeshifter coming in, and we saw in that match against Typo, there were maps they hadn't even played before. And that's the maps that they ended up losing to Typo. Was that the maps that those great players, had no idea of how to engage.
I see.
And I think that's a very worthwhile thing to note, is that while, you know, it's a team that has the super squad, a super squad from 2018 isn't necessarily a super squad now. And we've definitely seen the kind of cracks show in that roster, and the points of weakness kind of really be exploited, especially then coming up against what is now currently the best team in the country. So I'd say that's a very relevant part of that. That's that roster and that roster's kind of outlook as a team.
Inflexibility, a complaint that could be leveled against Ragnarok as well, right? So Taryn, you agree with, because we were kind of uniquely positioned to see this team's rise and fall in the same match. A totally dominating performance to start off with against Inglorious Blasters, and then just a total, I hesitate to say total capitulation, but they kind of came up against a composition they didn't quite know how to handle, and they ended up floundering looking for a solution. So, do you agree with Blair's assessment that there is obviously talent there, but it's a bit dated, a bit unprepared, maybe is a phrase you could use coming into that finals or coming into Overwatch 2 in general?
Yeah, I would like to think so. I mean, we know Beastie Boys has always been that team that they're not there to practice. They're there, they show up to their matches, they play the game. We obviously don't know how much these players play behind the scenes, but based on the fact that they didn't know the maps, you've got to say not all that much. And that's always going to count against you, especially you can kind of like hide that a little bit more in Overwatch 1 because the fundamentals to the maps were there. I mean, you think back to things like Havana, for example. You might not have played that map, but like recently, but this is the points that we want to take fights. This is how we want to take fights. But Overwatch 2 maps, especially, I mean, you look at something like Shambali, it's got
Very
similar
different.
attributes to other maps, but it's very, very different. And you saw those cracks showing in their series against Cyber, where they just did not know where they were taking those fights. And it's very difficult to say that this is a team with elite players. We can't disagree with that, but are they current elite players? And sure, individually they're still going to have that skill, but does that skill just straight over translate to Overwatch 2? And we've seen, and I would like to say no. Like, yes, they're going to outperform most teams in South Africa, but when a push comes to shove, they're going to struggle. And that's what we ended up seeing in the series. As soon as they were tested, as soon as Inglorious Blasters threw something at them where they couldn't adapt to, and right at the end tried to adapt to, they just couldn't match up.
Yeah, I can see what you guys are saying here, where you guys are coming from. So what I'm going to suggest here is that they were our third place team. I'm going to say we put all the top 3 teams into the tier list at the same time. Because my suspicion is that for 2 of these teams, there's a conversation about the tier list to be had as they relate to each other. So we'll come back to placing the Beastie Boys onto this list once we've covered our second and first place teams. Does it work for you guys?
Yeah,
that works for me. Yeah.
So
also keeps the suspense.
Yeah,
keeps
exactly.
the viewer experience.
Our podium paying positions here. We're gonna keep you waiting. Right. So second place team. We've now gotten all the way up to our top 2. Now again, if I can poo-poo the Swiss story here for a moment. Weird that these teams didn't play each other. Or if they did, like Eulogy is a bit of an outlier here, right? Our second place team. We had a quote-unquote finals between Inglorious Blasters and the Beastie Boys. And when that match finished, we had no idea who was going to finish second. Because that all still needed to kind of, trickle out. So at the end of it, all said and done, Rage Quit Eulogy ended up coming second. So taking a look at that squad, because I don't even believe we were able to cover them at all in the tournament, right?
No.
Yeah, there was difficulty finding their matches and then being able to cover their matches. I know their match against Cryptic was one that was particularly difficult to even get running, let alone casted.
So it is Parasox, Deadshot, Jack, Owl, Trigger, and No Fish. So a couple of familiar names here. Parasox, Deadshot, 2 players
from Legacy.
As part of Rage Quit Legacy. Trigger, is this Trigger Happy?
From Odyssey,
yeah.
Right, very familiar with him as a player. Kind of think of him for Diva Bombs. That was kind of the thing he was most known for. Is he playing tank at the moment?
Yeah. I think him and Jack alternate in that tank role. And he sometimes moves on to DPS as well.
I want to say Deadshot.
Deadshot and Para supports.
Okay, right. Not a DPS player. A misnomer. Parasox, definitely recognized. Then you've got Jack, Owl, and No Fish. You mentioned Jack as a tank player alongside Trigger. So presumably Owl and No Fish, they are DPS. Cool. A roster with some known names and half and half known and unknown names, right? Then looking at their results here, Eulogy 3-0 versus Powered Up Possums, so that's Babs and Scars and the boys. Then it was 3-1 against Blackwatch, so they lost 3-1. So taking a map of Blackwatch, something not all teams could do in this tournament. Then 3-0 against Cryptic, a team, a bottom team. No, HSWK, so second from the bottom. And then 3-0 against Hatchlings, also kind of near the bottom/middle of the tournament. So based purely on results here, a team that kind of almost the opposite of what HSWK got, where they got slapped down by top team after top team. Eulogy kind of got put up against a lot of teams in the mid-table or the near the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar situation to what we saw XVG Ragnarok have. The one exception being,
true.
and the thing that actually gave them second place is that they took a map against Blackwatch.
That is true, and they played Blackwatch early, right?
Yeah.
So this was
peak Blackwatch. So, thanks, guys. Could have been second. No, but I mean,
would Ragnarok have been second if it
it would have been tied for second.
Really, that's crazy.
Yeah, like if they took a map or Blackwatch,
would have been bad. Oh my god, sorry. Every time I see, I'm like, wait.
Well, yeah, because there's 4 teams that were in that contest for first, second, or for second to fifth, and the reason that Eulogy comes out on top of that is because they took a map of Blackwatch.
Because otherwise, it's like exactly the same for everybody.
Beastie Boys have their cancelled out with Typo and Glorious Blasters, and so everyone else's map difference is exactly the same. Eulogy have one map on them, so I mean, credit to them for taking that map, getting that result.
Nobody else was doing it.
No one else did it, so they did. So that puts them in the position that they're second and fairly second. However, the weakness of their schedule compared to like Five Nights at Freddy's, who had all the hard teams, and
they had Typo in there, right? by your logic,
I suppose. So so that's their
hatchling
game, right?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, they got their win versus Typo. In all fairness, but so They got their wins and they deserve their second place, but I think the weakness of their schedule is something that we really have to take into account when evaluating this team.
Yeah.
And that, there is potential for this team to prove us completely wrong. I mean, a map versus Blackwatch is nothing to scoff at with the players they have on their roster. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this team goes on in the league this season.
Yeah, and this is again not a Pugs team as well, right?
Yeah, this was a preform
running
team.
as part of Rage Quit.
They were running towards the end of Overwatch 1 and came into Overwatch 2 as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a team we can expect to see stick together and kind of put up performances going forward. Taryn, you think we're going to see this team grow? It's kind of hard to talk about a team growing from second. But I think there's enough. We have enough caveats here that we can say they're probably, if you were to power rank the teams, you probably wouldn't put them second. So what are your thoughts, Taryn, on Eulogy as a squad?
It's very difficult to say because I think a lot of their players, like even the known ones, aren't necessarily proven at the top. I think Trigger is the only one out of the known players we can say he's proven towards the upper echelon of Surf and Overwatch, whereas Parasox and Deadshot, they've more been on teams where they've been fighting near towards the bottom. So it's difficult without having seen them perform to see where they are in terms of their level right now, added on the fact is they've got completely unknowns. So we don't really know, and like the only matches we can really say this is where their level is at is that match against Blackwatch. They do end up taking a map off them, which puts them definitely in a tier above, but at the same time, you've also got, like, we talk about post versus pre-capitulation of Blackwatch, and we would like to say that that's pre-capitulation.
Yes.
So it's difficult to say what would have happened had the other teams, I think it was Typo and Five Nights, what would have happened if they played against Pre-Capitulation Blackwash?
Yes, yeah.
Would their series have been a lot closer? And if we're seeing the same results as currently, then you say, okay, maybe Eulogy's that step below it, because they did end up losing that game. The rest of their fixtures, as Blur mentioned, very very similar terms of Ragnarok. You've got obviously Parla Possums, which matches Cryptic and Huasco Varticliffe, both the bottom two teams, and then Thomas More and Hatchlings play the 3-2. So definitely a step above Ragnarok. It's difficult to say otherwise, though.
Okay, I get what you're saying. So that's team 2. We're gonna pop them into our tier list here once we've covered first place. So let's take a look at our standings here for one last time, as we talk about our P1 team here, and it is none other than the Inglorious Blasters. Hard to argue with this team being at the top. They are the team whose position is completely inarguable, in my opinion. I think it goes without saying. They won all of their games 3-0. Except for the last one, where they actually had to do a reverse sweep. So on a different day, maybe it goes the other way. But I think we spoke, Blur, you especially spoke about how that match against Beastie Boys really exposed Beastie Boys' weaknesses. So their first match was a 3-0 against the Gods. Second match was a 3-0 against Five Nights at Freddy's, a team who was also in the top 5. And then a 3-0 against Blackwatch, pre or post capitulation, who's to say? And then a 3-2 against Beastie Boys in that match we all got to watch. So as clean as you like, with other than those 2 maps dropped, Beastie Boys at the top. So taking a look at their rosters, it is Sterling, not a different name. Sterling. Pablo, Apricornicus, Zwoom, Condi, Atsu, and Nyx. And I believe this is Unreal Nick. So Sterling and Antiablo, what an absolutely terrifying DPS lineup.
With bits of Condi there too.
And Condi, oh my god, what a nightmare. What a nightmare. This is why I'll never join Ragnarok. At some point, you're going to have to go up against shit like this. And then it's like, oh, that's my whole week ruined. Thanks, guys. Then we got Apricornicus and Atsu, I believe, were on support.
Apricornicus, Atsu, and we saw Condi on support as well.
And Condi as well.
Obviously, a very accomplished support player too.
Yes, and tank player, and DPS player.
Just throw him wherever. Make a team of Condis.
I don't know, man. Just whatever. Put him wherever. He's GM. They're all friggin' GM. And then on tank, we've got Nyx. And then obviously, probably of all the roles, I think the one role you could say has a singular best player is probably tank. And it's definitely So, yeah. That includes, you look at this roster and you think, how do they not win? And then they did.
They are the closest thing to a super roster we'll have in South African Overwatch. It's a team of the best players, and you can't take away from the results that they showed and the level that they showed throughout this tournament. They're just a phenomenal team.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish I had more to say about them. They're that good.
It's like, what do you even say?
Welcome
back, Sterling, right? Because he was playing Apex for a while, right?
Content creation, and now he's back playing Overwatch. He's at GM now as well, so he's doing really well for himself.
Like I said, they're handing GM out to anybody, any comments.
Just making it rain with the GM badges in South Africa at the moment.
Yes, man. Teron, do you have anything to add on Inglorious Blasters other than they're so good? It's sad to watch.
Yeah, it's not. It's like it's basically the situation where we're looking at what ATK was, back during the ATK tournament. No one can touch them, and I'd even argue at the comparing those two teams, Inglorious Blasters to me is a stronger roster than that ATK roster, and they were extremely dominant. And sure, yes, you could argue they had to reverse sweep. That doesn't, compared to ATK team, which was a lot more dominant in terms of results, I would like to say this current Beastie Boys roster is probably even stronger than what that one was, even though it's similar players. And in the maps that they did win, they look completely dumb. And it felt, obviously we don't know, but maybe a little bit of trolling, maybe a little bit, we're not exactly, weren't prepared for Beastie Boys to come out as strong as they did. And once they kind of got into gear, they just left them behind. It was overlapping basically in terms of performance. So there really isn't much else to say about them.
Yeah,
I think it's a little unfair to Beastie Boys to say that Ivy were trolling the first two maps, but there was definitely a shift in level as they progressed through the game, and I think that was quite clear.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd agree they're more dominant than ATK as well. For me, that AD squad was like untouchable because they also had the power of like preparation and coaching behind them. That
they had the Batman effect. Infinite prep time.
Exactly. The teams nowadays aren't really showing the same level of over preparation almost.
Yeah.
Inglourious Blasters, hard to say they weren't worthy winners, but they did end up having to reverse sweep in that final match. So not a total whitewash from their perspective. So now we can finally take a look at our tier list here once again. And I was thinking it would be controversial, but listening to what you guys are saying, it feels like you have a pretty clear sense of where you want to put some of these teams. So let's start, in my opinion, with the team that is closer to the bottom of the tier list when compared to these other two teams, right? So Eulogy. We spoke at length about why, in spite of their impressive performances, they might not be on the level of some of the teams near the top. So how do we think they line up here? From what you guys are saying, my instinct is actually somewhere approaching Ragnarok's skill level. I
wouldn't put them that far down because they did merit their results and they did the thing that Ragnarok couldn't and took a map of Blackwatch. But I would say that comparative strength of fixture list and the quality of teams that they were playing against, I'd say they're below Five Nights.
Okay. In A.
Yeah. I don't think you can say this, the team that finished second finishes anywhere below A tier.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to them.
You can if it's one map, that's the difference. In kind of a screwy format. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I hesitate to throw shade on anybody.
The one map putting them at differential to Five Nights at Freddy's, to be fair.
Yeah.
True. I guess you guys are all kind of messing around in the middle there. So, okay. Ten, you agree with that?
Yeah. I think you've got to. Like, you can't... It doesn't sit well with me to say a team that finished second is B tier. Like, it just never sits well unless you've got every other team in B tier, right? And then you just have like the S tier, and that's not the case here. So you have to put them, I think, at least definitely below Five Nights, just purely because of schedule, and again, which Blackwatch that Five Nights played against, we can't say for sure. Even though we have an inclination, they still end 1-3-0, and UG lost to that team. So you have to put them below, but that can change very soon.
I do see we're getting a little bit of response about Blackwatch in particular, and I do want to note that I do think Blackwatch at their peak would have been a better team. I think at their peak, Blackwatch would have been fighting for that, can they be pushing that S tier? But I do think it's worth noting that Blackwatch fell apart. Like, as much as they beat Eulogy 3-1, but they fell apart. They had a player rage quit their last game. It's not a team that I think you can justify putting any higher than they are.
Both Defect and Nick here are saying, how can they be above Blackwatch when they lost to Blackwatch? It's a fair point, but I guess that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah, but I think the way Blackwatch's tournament went, they started very well, and you see those first two matches, they had two very dominant results. But then after that, they just
exploded.
They just stopped.
They were just no longer a good team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also, yeah, I would make a case for top of B, because it feels to me a little bit like if I was watching a match between Five Nights at Freddy's and Eulogy, I'd be expecting a fairly dominant performance from Five Nights at Freddy's. And so in that case, would I expect them to be in the same tier? On top of the fact that they did lose to Blackwatch when Blackwatch is playing at or near its peak.
I do still think it's worth noting that they, as their performances go, they do finish second in this tournament.
Yeah, but again, I'm poking the format here quite a lot. Right, but if you guys both agree it should be last in A tier, then
Yeah.
I will follow your expertise on that. So we agree.
Dev, I think you're the tiebreaker here, homie.
It's got to be A tier. Like, again, it just doesn't sit well with me to say a team that finished second is in B tier. Like,
Okay.
it's just, I don't know. We will obviously see as the rest of the year goes on where they sit in relation to the other teams, but we've got to go off results at the end of the day. They won 3 matches. They took a map off what we can say is peak Blackwatch, which something not many teams did. Or actually, they were the only team to do so.
I mean, other than the teams that Blackwatch lost to, obviously.
Is that peak Blackwatch though? That's the
I
question.
mean, if you're gonna throw in peak, I mean, okay, Blackwatch is a bit of a unique case, to be sure. But I mean, if this is what you guys are happy with, I'm outvoted, and you guys are definitely the experts here when compared to me. Now we have what I would consider the 2 toppiest teams in the league, right? The teams that likely the final match we ended up watching, there's a very good chance that would have been the finals of a bracket.
Yeah.
So obviously Inglourious Blasters ended up coming out with the W. I think you, especially Terran, quite vocal about how they're an ultra team that has extremely dominant performances. Do you think these 2 teams are separated by a tier?
I do.
I think so.
Do you think Beastie Boys is in the same tier as Five Nights at Freddy's and Eulogy? Because I'm assuming now that you've got Beastie Boys a tier below Inglourious Blasters.
I think that Five Nights at Freddy's and Beastie Boys would be a very, very good game of Overwatch.
I think so, yeah.
I think Inglourious Blasters showed that they're a level above Beastie Boys as that game progressed. There was an element of Beastie Boys coming out with something they were very practiced on and being extremely strong on that. But once the answer was found, they just had no way of adapting to the way that Inglourious Blasters played. And Inglourious Blasters were winning, not just their macro game at the end of that. They was winning their micro game. They were beating them in the 1v1s as that game went on. And that's functionally what you're looking at, right? Is that you're looking at the Inglourious Blasters team has to be by far and away the best team in this country based on how those games have flowed and how they've played this tournament. And I don't think that there's anyone in their tier. And that's not a discredit to Beastie Boys' level. I just don't think there's anyone at that level.
Okay, so pretty much nailed down for Inglourious Blasters at the top of the pyramid here, right?
Yeah.
Now the question then becomes, and you alluded to it now, is Beastie Boys on the same level as Five Nights at Freddy's or a step above? Terran, what do you think of that?
I think they're close. If you compare the teams, yes, sure. The results against the Glorious Blasters obviously show Beastie Boys had a closer game, but if we take the 3 maps that they lost, obviously we haven't seen the 5 Nights match, but it's a 3-0 in that sense on both sides. And I think in terms of players on those teams, they are very similar, and Beastie Boys showed a lot of cracks, not only in the game they lost, but also their win against Typo. And you're going 3-2 against Typo, who, yes, we do expect to be better, but probably not on the A tier at the moment, like even in terms of expectations. Losing maps you really shouldn't. I would like to say that it's going to be very close between those two. And I don't see a world where they're a tier above Five Nights. Like, definitely can be a tier above Eulogy. That's obviously a whole nother thing, but Five Nights is that team to compare them.
Okay. So, I guess, looking at this, how you guys feel? Are you pretty happy with where teams are situated now? Inglourious Blasters alone at the top of the pyramid, and then looking down throughout. Anyone that jumps out at you that you might want to move up a spot or two, or move down?
That rage quit one does stand out to me a little bit here.
Yeah.
What in B tier?
Yeah, I think maybe they have to. Like,
Sorry,
they ended
Eulogy.
second. Yeah, Eulogy.
Oh, I see.
Like,
Because the
It's
question for
difficult,
me is, if we had a Tri-Nations tournament between these three teams,
I
what
think
would you
Eulogy.
expect
You'd expect
to see?
Eulogy to end at the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without
And I
a-
think you're expecting Ragnarok and Eulogy to be much closer than Five Nights or Beastie Boys versus Eulogy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it would be fair to put them top of B. I think they've performed exceptionally well this tournament. I want them to be in A, but I don't think just looking at these teams, looking at Beastie Boys and Five Nights, who the only thing separating those two was literally the strength of the opposition at the top of their list.
Yeah.
That ended up being the thing that separated third and fourth there. And the weakness of Eulogy's comparative schedule. I want to see Eulogy battle these teams and get into that A tier, but I think there's too much experience and too much known quality in those two A tier teams to really say that they're that they're a team that should be in that tier right now.
Well, we all know how I feel about that. Taryn, you were making affirmative noises there, so I'm guessing you're in agreement with Blur.
I think the more you look at it, you can't put them on the same level.
It feels out of place. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you really, really want to put a team that finished second in A tier, but you keep looking at, and BC Boys, Five Nights, shout at you as these teams are in top three without a doubt, and Eulogy can challenge that, but we need to see it first. We need to see them go up against these teams, and as Blur mentioned, how they would match up against Ragnarok. A team that overall they outperformed in terms of schedule. They won more maps against Blackwatch, so definitely the best team in that B tier at the moment, but could push towards A if we see them with good results against those teams.
I think if Blackwatch hadn't have exploded, I think we might have seen them pierce that A tier, right? If they'd maintained that peak performance from their Ragnarok match all the way through to their final match against Five Nights at Freddy's, which I imagine would have been quite a close match if the cooler heads had prevailed, perhaps. I think that could have been a fascinating piece of information, an interesting data point to see, are they on the level of those top two teams? Because on paper, I think they are. You look at their DPS lineup and you go, oh my god, what are we doing here? And so it's unfortunate that Blackwatch capitulated in the way that they did, because we now don't get a true sense of where they sit. Because I'm looking at that B tier and I'm like, Eulogy, Ragnarok side by side, 100%. Those two teams scream on the same level as each other to me, based on results, if not based on rosters.
Yeah.
And then, but Blackwatch stands out. You look at the roster,
Yeah.
look at their performances, and you go, a team doesn't feel like a team that obviously that beat both of these teams fairly comfortably. One map dropped aside. So yeah, I can see there being some controversy over that. But I agree with what you're saying, Blur. A team does not exist anymore, and they cease to exist halfway through their final match, if what I'm understanding based on what the murmurings are here. So yeah,
I think the
fine.
same can be said for Typo. Is that you look at their kind of like layout in that C tier, and you think, look, they're a stronger team on paper, right?
Yeah.
But the results didn't go their way, and it's
Look,
the same with Blackwatch.
I see what you're saying about Typo, but I'm still very much on the.
You're on that typo train.
It feels like a B tier team to me, at least.
Yeah,
it
and I
feels
think
on the level of a Ragnarok and a Eulogy, if not better.
I think the potential of that team, looking at the players they have, was definitely to push that A tier to like put themselves in contention for those top spots. But it's delivery, right? It's like at the end of the day, we didn't get that delivery that we needed from them, and it's unfortunate. But like just like Blackwatch and B, I hate to see Blackwatch and B because they're a group of really great players,
super strong team, yeah.
And I hate to see Typo and C, and I'm sure I'm gonna go, and my friends in Typo are gonna give me an absolute an earful for this one. But they're where they deserve to be based on how they perform in this tournament, and that's all I can like. That's what their results merited.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I'm just, Mr. Potential over here. Not, what the team could be versus what they're putting out right now. Taryn, again, you're on board with keeping Typo in that middle of C spot. I just want to explore all angles here, guys.
Yeah, again, it doesn't feel right to, but they have to based on results. It's the same as like with Eulogy. It doesn't feel right for them to be put in a tier when below when they finish second. But unfortunately, it's the hand that both the teams were dealt. They delivered the results they could, and unfortunately, Typo didn't deliver the results that they need to be in that beta. Even if it's not necessarily beating Five Nights, but a close series against them, we're definitely talking about them near the top of beta. But they unfortunately got a bit manhandled in that series, and their initial series, again, the maps that they won, how they won them, but you can also credit that to Beastie Boys not knowing the maps.
Okay, well, that I think we're pretty much in agreement for D&E. There's not really much conversation to be had there.
Yeah.
So let's just quickly run through our teams here from the bottom to the top. In E tier, we've got Cryptic and HSWK. Again, if you're watching, you're probably noticing that this is very similar to the results of the tournament. That was by design. We're kind of working around the tangible information, the empirical information we have on these teams, which is the result of the tournament. And we didn't really want to move teams around when they performed in a particular way. So that's why some of the conversation is happening. But looking at the E tier, we've got Cryptic and HSWK, our last and second last team. Then we've got the next team, whose logo is not jumping out at me as a team. It is Against the Gods and Powered Up Fossils. And then we have, so that's our D tier. Then in our C tier, had a couple of conversations about this. It is Typo, Hatchlings, and a third team. Again, whose logo is not a thing that jumps out at me as the team. Thomas More,
Typo, Hatchlings.
It's a crest, bro. It's like low res image here on my smallest monitor. So it's Thomas More, Typo, and Hatchlings. And then in B tier, we've got XVG, Ragnarok, Blackwatch, and Rage Quit Eulogy. And in A tier, we've got Five Nights at Freddy's and the Beastie Boys. And then finally, in S tier, alone at the top of the tower, it is the Inglorious Blasters, the winners of the Power Up Cup. I'm pretty happy with that one, gentlemen. Well, maybe one or two things have changed. But, we've been there already. Right? We've set our piece. We're all happy with where we are.
Yeah.
And so I think that pretty much brings us to the end of proceedings here, outside of one last things coming out of you guys about the future. So what's happening going forward here, Blur and Taryn?
Do you want to do this one or should I?
I think you kick it off since you're the main head behind it.
I'm not sure about that one, but sure. Okay, so what we've got coming up, which is we're going to be opening signups for tomorrow. We have. Where are these notes? I have made these notes, and these notes are not here. Okay, so we are using the results of this tournament to divide the standings into 2 leagues, which will be the top 8 teams in the upper league and the bottom 5 plus new signups in the lower league. That tournament will be starting in the 3rd week of March, which will be on the 20th of March will be the start of the league style tournament. This tournament will be an 8-week tournament, which then will be each team playing against each other team in the leagues. And then the top 2 teams from the lower league will go to the top league after that, and the bottom 2 teams of the top league will go to the bottom league, so relegation and promotion. And all the details of this will be going up tomorrow, and the tournament page will also be open tomorrow. So be ready to get your team signed up, and we're going to start getting those live as soon as possible. The other thing that will happen again is pickup teams will be formed again. Is a thing we seek to keep doing. So if you're not in a team currently and you're not really familiar with the process of finding a team, trialing for a team, or don't want to start a team yourself, come speak to us and we'll get you kind of sorted on a list for pickup teams and get you sorted into teams for the near future. I do believe that is everything I have to present right now. There will be some more stuff coming soon, but I can't say too much about that just yet.
Unfortunately, not yet.
Well, that sounds awesome. I'm so excited for more competitive Overwatch 2. And now we're building like a league, which is freaking cool. If you're familiar with VS Gaming and how they did things in the past, and a little bit of how we did the 80K tournament as well, I think it's derivative of that, just based on what you guys are saying. So yeah, 2 divisions, a top division and a lower division, with relegation promotion in between at the end of the stages. All the information of that is going out tomorrow, as Blair said, so it's can be a bit hard to follow now in verbal form, but it'll all be out in text form tomorrow and over the coming days. Signups, you said, open tomorrow or the 20th?
Yeah, they will open from the 6th and be open until the 18th.
Yes.
Right, with the tournament starting the week of the 20th.
Yeah.
Round robin, as you said.
Yeah.
So
round robin league format.
Exactly. So a ton of Overwatch to look forward to in the near future. Very, very cool. Glad to hear that. Of course, Power Up Cup now is behind us. Was a prize pool for that. I'm sure we'll talk about all the details of that for the new tournament and give it a name as well, because I know how bad we are at giving these things names. If I remember,
we don't have a name yet.
Yeah, that's...
we were supposed to have a name. We don't have a name. Leaks, by the way.
Yeah.
We don't have a name yet.
Well,
we will have a name. We will have a name by the time it goes out.
I was gonna say, you've got until tomorrow to get a name sorted.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. Any other information you want to put out into the world before we sign off here, guys?
I mean, just a big thank you to everyone who came out and participated, and everyone that supported this podcast as well. I know we solidly talked for a solid 2 hours. Sorry, guys. You had to listen to me for 2 hours.
Nobody's forcing you to listen.
Yeah,
so
Trizzle, I like that name. That's a good name. I'll start flaming you in casts and podcasts now.
Blur's Bean League. There we go.
Blur's Bean League.
The bean's back.
The bean cup. No. Anyway, but thank you for everyone who came out to support us tonight. It was really, really good to have everyone in chat with us, and we're looking to keep Overwatch flowing in this country as we go. Sorry, I just got a lovely message from someone we know is Laid, who says, "God, 2.5 hours, I'll never get back." So
nice. Nice.
Wow. Again, we forcing people to listen to this, right? You got only yourself to blame. And this is good peak content, okay? So just when it's not there, you're sad it's not there. So just appreciate while you have it. Right, anything else from you, Ter?
No, I mean, just excited for what's to come, and obviously, as the time goes, we'll have more plans to share, and I'm very excited to share those plans. And excited to do more of these podcasts. Maybe next time will be a bit more planned, I would like to say. It was a lot of fun to do, I will say.
What is that? This podcast?
Podcast.
Oh, sorry, I was reading in the chat here. Lion League? Are we still? Can we still not use the word league in our tournament names? Because that was a rule for a while, right?
I don't think so.
We could be the Rhino Shield.
You can. There's 5 animals. We've used one of them, so you guys can work around that if that's the route you want to go. Just throwing out ideas here. I came up with that idea in the first place.
We used ESCOM as our 6th for Power Up Cup. So the big 5 and M.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to be that, guys. Everything you could ever want to know about the Power Up Cup. Some look behind why it ran the way it did and its purpose, and now also a look into the future, which is a big part of why the Power Up Cup was the way it was. We're looking forward to more Overwatch going forward, more competitive Overwatch going forward. If you want to get involved, as you've heard from Blur, and you don't have a team and you're scared to trial for an established team, hook up with the competitive Overwatch Discord server, which is being posted in chat fairly regularly. If you want to talk Overwatch, hang out, talk about other nonsense, that's the place to do it. And if you want to get involved in teams, just throw your name in the relevant channel somewhere and you can get involved. Information for the nameless tournament that is to come will be out tomorrow along with its name. So keep an eye out on the COWZA social media channels. They have a Facebook group, which they probably never use. They've got a Twitter page at ZA Overwatch on Twitter. Of course, they have a Twitch channel, which is where you guys are right now. So give that a follow. And if you have some bucks, you can give it a subscribe as well if you want. And then, of course, there's a YouTube channel. All of the VODs, be they matches or content pieces like this, will end up on the YouTube channel. Keep an eye out on Spotify. Again, we're not 100% sure if that's going to come together or not, but we will hopefully, never mind, we are 100% sure that's going to come together. And maybe some other platforms as well for the audio format of this. And then finally, my name is Sun Phoenix, at Sun Phoenix on Twitter, SUNPHEONYX. Blur, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, all our handles are on the screen below us.
Well, actually, mine's not.
Yeah, yours is wrong.
No, that's not my Twitter.
But anyway, underscore RSA. You can only find me on Twitter because you can actually find me on Discord as well, I guess, if you really just at me in general, I suppose. Please do not at me in general. I have done a bad thing.
Oh yeah. Oh, here we go.
I have done a bad.
Here we go.
But yeah, so my you can find me on Twitter. I say some stuff occasionally. It's usually quite sarcastic.
Awesome. Terror Lord, have we now corrected your? No, we haven't. All right. So where can we find you? The correct place. Ignore the written text there and listen to Terran's sultry tones here.
So my Twitter is Terran Lord, which is same but not same. That's a whole story, but won't go into that. And most of my Twitter, if you're honest, is just retweets of COWZA Twitter and potentially articles.
The things are coming through.
Yeah, I can really see that's just in general. And yeah, I guess also on Discord, but please do not at me. Thank you very much. Don't do what you're doing to Blur.
And twitch.tv/.
Lord of Terrans, I guess. I don't really stream.
Now I'm catching strays here as well. Thanks, guys. Right. So at Terran Lord on Twitter, at Blur_RC on Twitter, and at Sun Phoenix on Twitter is where you can find all of our social media. None of us are streaming or have YouTube channels or anything like that because we have no respect for our personal brand. And then, as I said before, critical. If you want to keep up to date with all things competitive Overwatch in South Africa, at ZA Overwatch on Twitter. Everything that COWZA puts out ends up on Twitter. So if you want to keep up to date, you got to peep that every now and again. Right. Then finally, our lovely host here, not
Oh,
me,
this guy.
our other host in the background,
Our producer.
our producer
MA
at the
Production.
Peach ZA on Twitter. If you like what you see, all the graphics, if you like the quality of the production, there was a lot of angle switching and all that good stuff. That was all manual. He was paying attention. There you go. Ooh, look at that. Ooh. Production
He's just
dust
showing off now.
sprinkled
Yeah.
on the exactly, right? If you like all of that stuff, he's the man to do it. And if you need stuff done, contact him and maybe pay him as well. That's gonna be that, guys. Keep an eye out for the last time on @Overwatch on Twitter. There's a new tournament coming out. It's, I would say, in the works, but it's ready to be birthed here. And tomorrow is the day where all that information will come up. So once again, finally, guys, thank you so much for watching. We had an awesome time here this evening. I think it goes without saying. A lot of time talking shit about some of our favorite teams, and putting
The
them all on
third
tier
swear
list.
word on the street.
100% correct tier list as well. And again, guys, if you're not happy with where we put you on the tier list,
Flame us on Twitter.
Just prove us wrong.
Oh,
right?
that one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll see you. There's a tournament coming up, so we'll see you guys around then.